Good evening, everybody. What I would normally say is praise the Lord, and people in the audience will respond. Okay, we got a few church folk in here tonight. Listen, my name is Pastor John. I'm the youth pastor at Triumphant Church, and I just wanted to say a few things before we got started. Our church at Triumphant Church was founded with youth. It was actually the first members of Triumphant Church were youth, if I'm not mistaken. And our leaders, Bishop and First Lady Matthews, started there and grew to where we are today, which has a few hundred members now. So we thank God for growth. And yesterday was our Youth Sunday. It was Heritage Sunday, and we were invited by our Vice Mayor today, and we thank God for her visiting us as much as she does. Can we give her a round of applause? Yes, so I just wanted to introduce what we do at Triumphant Church for our youth. We do a lot for our youth, and like I just stated, we were founded on youth, and our leaders continued the vision of that mentality, that idea of growing youth and them giving back. My wife is actually one of the early members of Triumphant Church, and she's grown from there and is now giving back. So real quick, I do want to tell you just two things that we do every year. One thing that we do, or let me tell you our motto. Our motto is we want to show our youth the world so they don't desire the streets, right? So what we do is we take our youth once a year on a trip out of town, whether that's out of country, whether that's to a different state. We do that every year. And then another part of the year, we take our youth to a youth camp. We call it Campfire. So what I would like to do is, if you have any youth, or if you would like to be a part, or even if you would like to be a partner with Triumphant Church and Triumphant Youth, I encourage you to reach out to me after service. Again, my name is, after this event, my name is Pastor John. And yes, I invite you to reach out. If you have any youth that want to be a part, please join us at Triumphant Church. We'd love to have you. Now, without further delay, our praise and worship team at Triumphant Church. Let's put our hands together one more time.
we please give them another round of applause? Wow. And they will come back after the program. They have another song for us, and we're just so thankful. Again, I'd like to introduce to you Bishop Fred Matthews and his First Lady Allison. If you would please stand up. Please stand up. At this time, without any further ado, I'd like to welcome you to the consolidation of the Metro government and the role that the African Americans played. Is 60 years old now. That's so young to me now. How about that? Okay. And I'd like for you to meet our primary advisors, and they are Roseanne Hayes, which is the Chief of Staff of the Metro Council. Roseanne is back there, if you raise your hand. Then we have Tam Gordon, which is an outstanding journalist, and she's currently employed by Metro. There's Tam over there. And then we have Linda Harper, and she gets aggravated at me. She works in the Metro government with me in the mayor's office, and she's our there she is right there. Raise your hand. She gets kind of salty with me because she's Senator Harper's daughter, and I'm very proud of that. And she's our strategic planner. And then, of course, you have yours truly. I would like to say that, of course, we have our special guest, which is the Triumphant Church. You know, I think we would not have made it over had it not been for the church. People like John Lewis and Martin Luther King and so forth, and the ones that positioned their shoulders for them to stand on. But Jesse Jackson and the church played such a significant role in us and the things that we've accomplished over the years. I also have a young man at the end of the program. I'd like you to stand up. And his name is, well, he's known as KJ. And I want him to stand up. And as I'd like for you to turn around. I'd like for everybody to see you because I want you all to remember KJ. And I'm going to tell you who KJ is. I was in church. I was at the Triumphant Church. And God just places people on your heart. And I just watched he and his mom, Pebbles, and his aunt. And God just placed him on my heart. And then he went up for prayer. And I was saying, see, Lord, there you go. And I don't know, he's just a fine young man. He was so warm and ingratiating. And I have something for you that's at the trophy shop. I have something for your pastor at the trophy shop. And I'm going to present it to both of you all at church on this coming Sunday, if that's okay.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I'd like for his family to stand up, if that's okay. His mom and his aunt, everybody that's affiliated with you, and I'd like them to stand. These are his family members, and again, and I want y'all to take a good look at him because God has something special. God dropped that in my spirit. Something special God has for you. At this time, thank you so much, KJ, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and be. He's a sophomore at Glencliff, I can tell you that much. He's a sophomore at Glencliff. And at this time, I want to bring to your attention Dwight Lewis and Kara Brucey. I want you all to know, have anybody ever heard of this young lady right here? She's the Metropolitan Nashville and Davidson County historian. This lady knows everything about Metro Nashville. She is just fascinating. And has anybody ever heard of Dwight Lewis? Well, if you haven't, I feel sad for you. No, I'm just teasing. But Dwight, stand up, please. That's Dwight Lewis. And he's a retired reporter, and he's an editor, and he's an author. And what I'm going to do right now, without any further ado, panelists, I want you to know that these two are going to introduce you all. And Carol is going to take her place right here. And then Dwight is going to stand there. And we're just going to talk about the role that we play as people with melanin in their skin in the consolidation. Thank you so much. Let's give them a rousing round of applause.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Haywood. It's been such a pleasure to work on this whole 60th anniversary with a lot of young people and new people, and we're just getting started now. So the big finale will be on Saturday, April the 1st, down at the park in front of the Metro Courthouse. when Nashville came up with this idea of consolidating the city and the county government, it was a bold experiment. We had no idea where this was going. There were 2 or 3 other cities and counties in the United States that had merged, but this was really a much more thorough effort to put this together. After World War II, we've got the population of Davidson County really growing very, very rapidly, and we've got some needs here. We can't accommodate all of the children in schools. We've got a health department that is really being led by the county health official, and so the city and county health departments merged here long before Metro came up. But once that had happened, that kind of said, well, maybe this could work here. It was an interesting combination of people who supported creating the consolidated government that we have today. It was a combination of the longtime politicians, the business community of Nashville. It was churches around the community that were interested at least in investigating this. It was supported heavily by the League of Women Voters. And so there were all of these groups working together. Now they did convince the Tennessee General Assembly to approve some legislation that allowed them to explore consolidating the government. And they began talking about this in the early 1950s. And then in 58, we actually had a charter written. It was a charter that would merge both the county and the city governments together. It passed in the city, but it failed in the county. Now, the county judge, who was the executive of Davidson County, was Beverly Briley, and the city mayor was Ben West. Now, both of our newspapers, remember the days, some of you have to be of a certain age to remember when we had a morning paper and an afternoon paper, but we had the Tennessean in the morning and the Banner in the afternoon, and their publishers both supported consolidation. So it seemed to me that it was going to really happen, but it failed in the county and passed in the city. So Ben West, the mayor of the city, knows he has got to improve the city's tax rate. We've got children to be educated in schools. We've got all of these services to provide. And so what Ben West did was attempt to achieve consolidation and raise his tax rate by another means. And he started annexing some parts of Davidson County. It first started with industrial properties, and there was no complaint about that. But then there was the annexation of neighborhoods on the periphery of the borders of the city limits. And so that was one of the 2 sparks that sort of lit the fire to try to consolidate the government again with a second charter commission. And one of the things that Ben West did that really angered people out in the county was he needed to raise revenue, and he created a wheel tax so that everybody who drove into the city limits of Nashville to work every day had to have a green sticker on their car, or they would be stopped. And he really wanted them to be arrested and booked, but that was a little severe. And so they all were stopped, and that infuriated people in the city, and they said, let's go again. Let's go again. And this time the county really hated the green sticker tax. And so they said, let's try again. So they created a new commission. Both of the commissions were racially diverse. They were 10 members, and there were 2 African Americans. You saw the video about Dr. Z. Alexander Luby here a minute ago. And then we had George S. Meters, who you may recall owned the People's Pharmacy on Jefferson Street and had some other businesses here in town. So they served on both of the committees. And so the challenge for the second commission was, how do we improve on diversity? Can we create a bigger council so that we will have more diversity on the people who are making our laws? And indeed, this time around, when the vote took place, it passed in the city and it passed in the county. But the African American community by this time had endured the urban renewal and the location of the interstates, which greatly hurt the united areas of the African American community. The African American community had borne the burden of school integration in 1957 when Nashville, it wasn't the Metro, it was the Nashville Board of Education, started a plan that they thought was really good called the stair-step plan. But African Americans had the burden of integrating the schools. They would integrate one grade at a time for 12 years. How long was it going to take? 12 years. And to put the burden heavily on the African American communities, the way that the change was made was that any African American family who lives closer to a white school than a black school that they are zoned for may choose to enroll their child in a white school. Now, do you see what burden that was, you young people? You see what a burden that was and how unfair that was. And so the African American community had endured a lot. And so now we are facing giving up some power in the city to support what some are saying was for the better good. So the African American community this time around was more heavily divided. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lewis here, who will introduce our panelists.
Thank you. The first panelist to my immediate left is Pat Nolan, a well-known and award-winning journalist with WTVF Channel 5. Pat is the host of Inside Politics, a weekly political interview, and he also has Capitol View, which is an online political commentary. Pat is a graduate of Vanderbilt University and has worked for Mayor Richard Fulton. Next to Pat is Linda Wynn. Linda is a graduate of Tennessee State University. She's director for state programs, publications editor for the Courier for the Tennessee Historical Commission. Linda has also taught at Fisk University. And next to Linda is attorney Edward Kendall. Attorney Kendall is an author, has a book out about historic Jefferson Street. He's a former school board member, former councilman, and a lifelong resident of Nashville, Tennessee. And I understand that we're going to show the video again of Attorney Luby. Okay. And then we'll get the discussion started.
Nashville is celebrating 60 years since Metro's consolidation. And you can't talk about consolidation without talking about Z. Alexander Luby. Long before consolidation was a part of the conversation, Luby was already a powerful force for change. In 1934, he represented a black woman seeking justice for her son's death after a Davidson County deputy sheriff shot him without cause. In 1946, he was one of 3 NAACP lawyers to defend African American defendants charged with murder in Columbia, Tennessee. The other 2 attorneys were Maurice Weaver and Thurgood Marshall. They won acquittal for 23 of their clients. Luby won a seat at the then Nashville City Council in 1951, one of 2 black members since 1911. He helped write 2 pro-consolidation charter amendments. The first failed in 1958, but the second prevailed in 1962. Luby went on to serve 2 terms on the Consolidated Metro Council. And for his work to integrate schools and defend student protesters who peacefully sat in at Nashville's segregated lunch counters, Luby's house on Meharry Boulevard was bombed. He died in 1972. Today, 3 Metro institutions are Luby namesakes: the Luby Branch Library, the Luby Community Center, and the Luby Theater. A special civil rights room and collection at Nashville Public Library celebrates Luby and other civil rights heroes. And at Fisk University, where he taught, you'll find the Z. Alexander Luby collection with letters, news clippings, photographs, and more. Today, we celebrate 60 years since Metro's consolidation, and we honored Z. Alexander Luby, a powerful man with a brilliant mind and a relentless courage. A special thanks to Mayor John Cooper, Deputy Mayor Brenda Haywood, and the Metro's 60th Organizing Committee, Carol Busey, County Historian, Deona Layden, Special Collections Librarian at Fisk University, the Special Collections Division at Nashville Public Library, Greg Hall and the Luby Branch Library team, and Metro Parks.
Carol mentioned to you all, it's been 60 years since the Nashville city government and the Davidson County government consolidated, or merged. I want to talk to Pat, Linda, Ed, Carol. Let's find out. 1958 was the first year tried to pass the referendum. Pat, where were you? How old were you? How old were you in 1958? We were talking the other day on the phone. Pat was.
I have no strong memories of either one of the elections, but I was 6 years old when the first vote was held in '58. I don't have any memories of that. The second one in 1962, I was 10, and about all I remember was the end of it when there were people who were campaigning against it that had signs up around town and bumper stickers that said, "Castro has Metro." Wow. There were a lot of people who voted against it because some people, and that includes some people that were in the council, some of the black members in the council said that Metro was communism. But that's really all I mean, I don't have what I'm going to tell you tonight is a lot of what I've been told and what I've read from doing research. I don't have any physical memories of it, even though I was alive at that time. I was just very small.
And I'm wondering if they can hear you. Can you all hear well? Can everybody hear well?
Okay.
Speaking to the mic.
I can speak louder.
Speaking to the mic.
Is this working?
Yeah. Just pull the mic closer.
Sure.
Linda, if you were around in 58 and 62, do you remember anything about any talk about consolidation or merger of the two different governments? And what were your parents? Did your parents talk much about it to you?
They did talk about it. I was about 10 years old. And if you know anything about that generation, when grown people were talking, you were to be quiet and not say much. I do remember them talking about it. And I remember my extended family talking about it. And some in my family were for consolidation and some were against. I think my father was pro-consolidation. He was a business person, so he saw the possibility of increased revenue, if you will. My mother went along with my father, obviously. Other members of my family were against the consolidation because they felt that some power would be lost within the African American community.
Okay. Mr. Kendall?
Well, I was around. I've been around forever. I think in '58 I was probably a junior high school. In '62, I was a senior at Pearl High School. So I do remember both elections. Vaguely, the first one, I wasn't quite old enough to really be that interested in what was going on then. But the second election in '63, was it '62 or '63?
62 was the election.
62 election actually came about in '63. But as I said, I grew up on Jefferson Street, and it was kind of in the heart of the black community, and I guess the zip code 2708 and 2709 and maybe one or two more basically made up the city. And I think at that time about 45% of the city population was African American. So there were a lot of people there were some people who were opposed to it because, as Ms. Wynn said, some people felt it would dilute the strength of the black community. And there were some people planning on even running for mayor, you know, because they could possibly win in the inner city. But if it became metropolitan government, they feel they didn't have a chance. But as Ms. Boosie had said, you actually had two council members on the city council. That was Z. Alexander Luby and a lawyer by the name of Bob Lillard. And in the 62 election that they had to consolidate, Bob Lillard was opposed to it, and Z. Alexander Luby was in favor of it. Actually, when the vote came in 62, only about 45% of the African Americans voted for it, but that was enough, you know, to make the difference. I think it won by what, 56%?
56.
So that was enough to bring it into being. Since then, I think most African Americans believe that it was the right thing to do. I certainly do at this point in time. I think back then I might have been opposed to it, to be honest with you, because I've also felt that it might dilute the whatever power that we had gained in the African American community. But one of the most interesting things that happened, Z. Alexander Luby was on the commission, and he fought very hard to make sure that we had a supply of council members. That's how we got the 40 council members, not just him, but others too, to ensure that blacks were represented across the city under the new metropolitan government. And that's how we ended up with 40 council members, well, 35 district councilmen and 5 at-large councilmen. I mean, I could talk forever on this, so I'm gonna stop right
Okay,
now.
let me, Carol, just a second. Pat has done some research, and he wants to read an article that he.
Mr. Luby was in the Tennessean on the day of the election, basically defending the 40-member. Now, he didn't talk about the 40-member council, he talked about the 35 districts. And the reason he didn't talk about at-large was that at-large representation was clearly seen across the South, particularly at that point, as a way of diluting or actually wiping out black representation. But among the 35 council districts, Dr. Luby said representation will be entirely equitable. The division of the county into districts was made partly on the basis of ethnic groups. Negro districts will be better represented under the charter than they are at present. I'd also say to you about Bob Lillard, after Metro was defeated, and there was an election held immediately after that to elect a new council. And Bob Lillard decided he still wanted to stay in the city council, so he ran again. And the article that the Tennessean wrote that day I thought was very interesting for the quote that he had when he announced his candidacy. It said, "It's a matter of public record that I have consistently and vigorously opposed metropolitan government. Majority of the citizens of Nashville and Davidson County have expressed their desire to depart from that form of government and adopt a more unified form of government. The courts have approved the legality of metropolitan government." And by the way, Bob Lillard was involved in some of the legal action that happened right up until a month before this actual election was held in November of '62. As any good American who should believe in democracy and the principles of democracy, I yield to the wishes of the majority. And I think that's interesting to note because I'm not sure that I think he'd get a lot of backlash about that today because we in this country don't let people change their minds about stuff. If you vote for something one time, you have to be, you're branded that way forever. And I think it's to the credit of the community and to Bob Lillard that he was willing to change his mind about it. And he did say in this thing, he said if he's represented by the people, if he's elected by the people in the 16th district, he will pledge to dedicate my entire effort and all my abilities to making sure the previous charter, that the current new charter will be those provisions will be followed and executed. So I think that's very good because I'm not sure today a lot of people wouldn't do that when they got into election. So I think that's interesting to know that he was willing to do that.
Carol, you're much younger than I am, but were you here in Nashville at that time, or what?
I came here in 1971 to go to graduate school. I grew up in Texas, and immediately I learned how important Metro government was, even though it had only been around for about 8 years when I arrived on the scene. And so I've been here to learn the story of how it was created and to see how the city has changed. I said a while ago that if any of those people who wrote that charter could come back and see this place now, they would think they were in a different world.
Let me just read this, and then I want to ask Linda and Ed to, you heard the names, Attorney Z. Alexander Luby and Attorney Robert Lillard. Just, it says, the African-American community who now, and it's from a book that Carol is writing and putting together about consolidation. The African-American community who now, back then, who now made up a third of the city's population were divided over the benefits of consolidation as well. Attorney Lillard feared that African Americans could lose their hard-won political gains if the city and county governments were merged. Attorney Luby, however, believed that consolidation would bring economic growth that would benefit all Nashvillians, including African Americans. Linda, tell the audience a little bit about what area did Attorney Luby represent and what area did Attorney Lillard represent?
Attorney Luby represented the area around Fisk University, Meharry Medical College, Tennessee State, and that corridor up and down Jefferson Street. Attorney Lillard was from the South Nashville district. And as I have thought about this, I see each one representing different constituencies. If you look at the area at that time, prior to the decimation of Jefferson Street, that is your middle-class area. Attorney Luby was supported by Vivian Henderson, who was an economist at Fisk. And if you go back and think about Vivian Henderson, and you know, the charter of Metro and Davidson County came at a very interesting time. You're talking about the early 60s. Remember, in 1960, you had the sit-ins, okay, that went up to 1964. Remember, in the early 60s, you had Stokely Carmichael come in. So Nashville is kind of in a precarious situation in terms of race relations. I think that may be one reason Ben West may have faced some difficulty because it was Ben West who said lunch counters should be desegregated. So when you look at Luby and Lillard, those different constituencies, I think, come into play. Again, Luby is basically in that middle-class area, or at least those who had middle-class aspirations. And that's gonna make a difference. Vivian Henderson is the one who figured out during the sit-ins that African Americans in Nashville was pouring about $50 million into the coffers every year. So you can see Luby with the economists, they're looking at different aspects of the program. Lillard was a very interesting individual, just as a personal note, he was my father's attorney. But I also wrote my master's thesis on Lillard, and he thought that consolidation was just not gonna be a good thing for the African-American community. He felt that they would lose what power they had gained. But when you actually look at what happened with the 35 councilmatic districts and the 5 at large, in 1951, Luby and Lillard went on the council together.
Right.
When Nashville and Davidson County consolidate, They are joined, I think, by 3 other council members.
Mansfield Douglas,
Mansfield Douglas,
John Driver,
John Drivers,
And Harold Love Sr.
Love Sr. So, the power sort of picks up. Now, I don't know if we're gonna get into what may happen in the not too distant future with Metro and Davidson County. But what we have right now may be subject to change in the not too distant future.
It's already changing.
Okay. Attorney Kendall, could you talk a little bit more about the difference between Attorney Luby and Attorney Lillard? Because Attorney Lillard might be seen, was he seen as a sort of more blue collar?
Yeah, he was. Well, he represented more of the blue collar part of the community. The book that I wrote and I just mentioned is A Walk Down Historic Jefferson Street. And I talk about Jefferson Street and my research and all that I did. Actually, about over 50% of the business people and professional people lived in that corridor. Not just on Jefferson Street, but that corridor, Meharry Boulevard, Albion, Hyman, all that area. Because, and one of the reasons you had all the universities there as well. Bob Lillard represented an area in South Nashville, which used to be referred to as Trimmer Bottom. It's out around 2nd Avenue where Napier Court and all those, and Sudicum Homes and some of those places are. So he represented a district that was less privileged, I guess you want to say. But he was, personally, he was a lawyer, a very good lawyer. He had a very deep voice. And when he would come in the courtroom, he'd get everybody's attention. He's a big guy. But Luby was probably one of the most brilliant lawyers this city has ever seen. The man had a doctorate degree in law, not just a law degree. The only problem I had with him, he had such a deep accent because he was from the West Indies. Antigua. And I couldn't understand, Antigua. Was Antigua. Mm-hmm. I couldn't understand what he was saying sometimes, but I was telling some of the panelists earlier that he came in the courtroom one time. I was there, I was just a teenager. I was doing the sit-ins, when he represented a lot of the people in the sit-ins. And he brought we have what we call a Tennessee Code Annotated, which is a law book that we go by, where your statutes are. And he started reading at it, and the judge, I can't remember who he was, the general session judge, he said, "We don't use that book in this courtroom. We don't use the green book," that's what he called it. So, but anyway, Bob, he was a very brilliant attorney. I recall when his house was bombed, I lived about 3 blocks from that. It was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and we heard this blast, and I think it was April the 30th, 1960. And of course, everybody went up there that morning, and
April 19th, 1960.
Was it 19th?
Yes.
But they were in the, he and his wife were in the back part of the house, I think. So, you saw the picture of the house. It was completely demolished on the front side. But he was also the, and I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but he also filed a lawsuit, the Kelly versus Board of Education lawsuit, which is the real reason we have desegregated schools today. Because when they started that, as Ms. Busey said, the idea was the Supreme Court said you have to do it with all deliberate speed. So what the city decided, we're going to do 1 grade at a time, as the deliberate speed is what they were calling it, but that didn't work. By the time we got to 1971, very few schools were desegregated, and a lot of the high schools had no African American kids. They closed down the inner city elementary schools. I went to a school called Fort Greene, and they closed down those schools, so the black kids had to be bussed out. So like she was saying, we had the burden on the black community at that time. But like I said, I know we're not here to talk about that, but I thought I'd throw that in as a little information. But
you might mention that it was also the longest running school desegregation case in the country.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was on the Board of Education for a good portion of it. I went on the Board of Education in 1985, and I got off in 2012, which was 27 years. And during that entire period that I was on the Board of Education, we won a court order with the federal court to ensure that schools stayed desegregated. They had certain percentages then. But all the time I was on the board, there was always this threat by 3 or 4 board members to go back to court and ask for what they call unitary status, meaning that there was no more vestiges of discrimination, which to me was ridiculous. We have vested discrimination right here today. But anyway, it finally, they finally did do away with it. I think with 1998, the court dismissed the case, and so. But anyway, that's a little extra history I want to throw in there.
Okay. Then, Carol, since education has come up, you write in your book, upcoming book, that talked about there was a charter proposal. 1958 was defeated, the first one. Second one, 1962 was voted on. But you say that the school board was the issue that caused the most discussion. Commission members were divided over whether the new school board would be elected or appointed by the mayor if the referendum passed. Both sides made persuasive arguments at commission meetings and hearings. The question of fair representation of the African American community was an underlying constant. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, and I will say one thing about Dr. Luby that's actually related to education. He represented the African American Teachers Organization in a lawsuit in the late 1930s suing the city because the city had one board of education and it was all white. And yet there were these 2 separate school systems, a black system and a white system. And he took them to court because the black teachers were being paid less than the white teachers when they had the same degrees, they had the same kinds of students to teach. A 16-year-old is a 16-year-old, and yet they were being paid considerably less than the white teachers were being paid. And he successfully took them to court to benefit education here. And the education process was very controversial out in the suburbs because they had pretty much lily white schools. And they were concerned about it. I mean, prejudice is prejudice. As we well know, it's still around today. And so there was a lot of talk about that out in the suburbs. But the Charter Commission, and then due to the good representation we had on the school board that emphasized diversity when Metro did go into effect on April 1st, 1963, that the African American community was represented on that board. Now, the second charter, the one that passed, in the beginning, the school board was to be appointed by the mayor with the approval of the council. And then there was a move to have the school board elected, and that was one of the amendments to the charter that was made to elect the school boards and have them in districts. Now, I would like to ask the former school board member here which system he thinks works better.
Elected.
Elected?
Yeah. I got on the school board right after the first election. I think first election was in '83, and I replaced one
School board election.
School board election. Yeah. And I replaced one of the members who had moved out of the district just to serve out that term, and that was my intent, to serve 2 more years and then do nothing. I stayed there 27 years. But that was in 1983 when they had the first elected school board. I think it's better. But it gives, the problem with an appointed school board, especially back then, it was too easy for one person based on their philosophy, especially when we were dealing with issues like desegregation. Because we had an interesting board. When I was on the board, we had some very good board members, Dewey Branstetter, a lot of people like that, younger people and some older people. But they were very, very intelligent people who listened and who agreed. I had to, at times, use my little strategies. I'll give you one example, and I know I'm taking up time here, but we, at one time, you know, Martin Luther King Day was not a holiday. It was an in-school observance day. And everybody on the staff at the school board was supporting that. And so I sat next to a gentleman who was a very conservative board member, Tom Hightower. He was an older man. And Tom said, we need to make Veterans Day, it wasn't a holiday either. We need to make Veterans Day a holiday. I said, you're right, Tom. He said, well, I'm gonna make the motion, will you second it? I said, I sure will. He made the motion, and then I made an amendment to include Martin Luther King. And it passed 5-4, because someone was just shocked, you know, but I didn't want to do it. But anyway, we had a very good board, and we really accomplished a lot when I was on the board. And I don't know, I don't watch the board anymore. When I got on the board, I know this is going to sound chauvinistic, but I'm going to say it. When I was on the board, there were 2 women, 7 men. Now there are 9 women. And that's okay, you know, because women are very competent. But I've watched some of the board members, and I saw a lot of,
No, I know what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
We all know what we know what you're talking about.
All right, let me move. Hey, Pat, you want to add?
Let me just add a little context to how we went from having the mayor appoint the school board by confirmation with the council and going to an elected school board. School board went through a number of gyrations and efforts to go back to court to try to find a system the court would approve and then declare them unitary. And one of the ones they were doing in the early 80s included closing down a lot of county schools that they wanted to basically take the students there and put them in the consolidated. For a while, the deal was we put everybody in consolidated high schools, we'll therefore bring about enough racial mixture that we'll be able to say we're in unitary status. That included closing Hillwood High School at the time, invited Jolton and I think a couple of others. It made the people in those communities so mad, they started a petition drive. That amendment to the council, to the charter, got on by petition drive, and it passed. And that's why we went from that, the mayor appointed, because during Beverly Briley's time, all the school board appointments were made by the mayor and confirmed by the council. That happened during the first part of Fulton's term. It changed there before I went to work for him, but that's how it got there, and it was because people got mad about that, and obviously the concern about losing their neighborhood school, their high school, still plays out today with the opening of a new Hillwood High School, but not where it is in Hillwood, but more further out into the Bellevue area. And that is sort of replacing the old Bellevue High School out there, I think, at least in a lot of old timers' minds, but that's how we came from having an appointed school board to an elected school board. That's the politics behind it.
Let me just read this report. Attorney Luby felt there should be some assurance of representation on the school board, just as there had to be some assurance of people of color representing in the legislative body. So that's why he was appointed to school board. Linda?
Yes.
I think you said earlier that if some of the people who were around today, played a role, if they were here today, they would be happy about what we see, or what would they say? Maybe you didn't say they would be happy.
Well, that statement was made in the context of what is happening in the General Assembly today. As you may or may not know, there is a bill pending in, I think it's passed Government Operations Committee, that would reduce the Nashville Council back to 20. So that it was made in that context. If it goes back to 20 members, my fear is that African Americans will lose representation, at least at the status that we have now. I think I read somewhere with the 35 to 40 members, each member has something like maybe 21 to 25,000 people that they represent. So, to me, that makes sense. If you go to 20 members, then it's gonna double, and, you know, I may call my council person and they may not be able to get back to me the next year because there's going to be an increase in the number of constituents that they are going to have, which, in my opinion, lessens the vote, or at least the representation that the African-American community has today. So it was in that context.
Okay.
I think if those who were around when Metro first came into existence, I think they would be surprised at what has been achieved at this point. You know, I think we have made some great strides. But again, just looking at it, you know, people look at me basically as a historian, but I'm also a public administrator with degrees in public administration. So I tend to look at, if you will, the political side as well. And I just see some changes that may be on the horizon that will not be beneficial to the African-American community.
We have about a little less than 10 minutes, about 10 minutes. Let me just read a couple of things, then we're going to take a few questions, 3 questions from the audience. I was up at Fisk University today. They have a great special collections section, and I was going through the Luby papers. And it just happened to have in here voted on 1962, voted for consolidation, it passed. The inaugural swearing-in ceremonies, April 1st, 1963. So Metro was effective April 1st. It was held at the Municipal Auditorium. Mayor Beverly Brawley was in charge. Here were a list of they had 5 at-large council members. Dan May, Tom McGrath, Harold Buster Boguski, David Scobie, and William Winter. The black members of the council, there were 5 of them. When Attorney Lillard and Attorney Luby were 2 in 1951, there was some excitement. Now here we are in 1963, and we have 5. Robert E. Lillard, District 16. A woman, she's not black, but a woman. Miss Frances Doyle, District 17. Harold M. Love, District 19. Z. Alexander Luby, District 20. John L. Driver, District 21. Mansfield Douglas, III, District 28. And let me read on April 3rd, 1972, we celebrated the 50th anniversary the 10th anniversary of Metro. Beverly Brawley was mayor. He said, and he started out like this. He started out his speech. He says, "My friends and fellow citizens of the greatest community in the world, I'm glad to be here this morning because I believe the message I have to give you may be one of the most important I've been privileged to bring you in the 9 years since the Metropolitan government of Nashville, Davidson County was initiated on April 1st, 1963. But before I tell you the things I have on my mind, I want to honor and pay tribute to a man whose recent death deprived this community of one of its finest civic and political personalities." And he was talking about Z. Alexander Luby. Attorney Luby died in March 1972, and this is what Mayor Brawley said. "Dr. Z. Alexander Luby was a loved and respected leader here for more than a quarter of a century. He left the imprint of his strong conviction, his wisdom, humanity, and his high and unwavering integrity on this city. He was my friend, although there were times when we were in honest disagreement. He was a staunch defender of his beliefs and his sense of right, and equally stalwart opponent of injustice. He was a great and good man. We owe him much, and we will miss his counsel." And then he goes on to say, "I would also like to recognize a group of citizens who contributed in great measure to the firm establishment of this new and now proven form of local government, the members of the Metropolitan Charter Commission. These men and one woman, Ms. Rebecca Thomas, made a great contribution to this metropolitan community. Dr. Luby, as you know, served on both the 1958 commission and on the 1962 commission." So he goes on. But if you have a question, how about standing and giving us your names so we can have a record of who you are, please? Anyone? And you don't have to be bashful. And let me just say this, especially for some of the younger people here, the Luby House is still standing on Meharry Boulevard. You know, there's no assurance that it will stand forever. So if you get a
Hopefully, the
chance,
historical marker that is there will
It's a
stand
marker,
forever.
yes.
and so if you get a chance, go by and take a picture in front of it. Take some of your friends, and it's just great will be a great something to have.
Dwight, can I add another point
Okay.
about Attorney Luby? You know, many people don't realize it, but he actually saved Thurgood Marshall's life back in the 40s.
In 46.
46 during the Columbia race ride, because they were stopped. They were coming back to Nashville. And the Columbia police wanted Thurgood Marshall. And Luby told him, don't you dare get out of this car. So Luby was really responsible for saving Thurgood Marshall's life back in 1946.
There was
At
a
that-
race ride in Columbia.
The Columbia race ride.
At that trial, somebody got up and slapped Mr. Luby, walked over to him and just, while he was sitting at the, lawyer's bench, and one of them
Yeah.
slapped him.
Okay, your name?
Ed Brandon, don't have anything to add to what we've been talking about for a while, but going back to what Carol Busey talked about at the beginning about the wheel tax, it's a while back, so I'm gonna let you edit my memory if you need to. But when we moved to Nashville, April 1st, 1965, Metro's second birthday, and I thought all the hullabaloo was for us. It was Metro celebrating its birthday. We lived at the foot of 9 Mile Hill, that big hill going out to Bellevue. And my mother, because Dad was managing the plant where the Bicentennial Mall is now, Mom had to take at least half a day and maybe a full day, depending on what day it was, to go down to the Howard School and stand in that line that went all the way around the building and down the sidewalk and so forth to buy that wheel tax sticker. And the sticker was $15, as I recall, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, and why did the people in the county get so upset about it? Think about the time that this was. My first job, summer of '70, was the burger chef that's now the Sportsman's Grill at the 70 and 100 split. My first paycheck, I earned 90 cents an hour. And then after my 30 days of being a trainee, I think I bumped up to $1.10. And so $15, when you're earning $1.10, or if you're a high-paid employee at $2.50, that's a day's worth of work, and that mattered to people. And when you go back and look at things in the past and look at some of these money things, keep in mind what people earned and what things cost. My dad, managing the plant, made $20,000 a year. So just to put some things in context and why the people in the county fought the way they did, I thought I would just add to your prior comments.
Well, that's just one of the reasons that a dollar went further in those days, or no, a dollar was worth more in those days than it is today.
Okay, Pat?
One other piece of context about when you got your stickers renewed and your tags. In those days, statewide, everybody's sticker expired at the same time. You had to go out and get that and stand in line, because everybody had to get it done by, say, the end of March. And so every year you'd see these huge lines. Well, finally they changed that, so everybody's is in a different month. So you don't have everybody in the whole county trying to go out to do that. But I don't know who decided that was a good idea, but it was obviously patently stupid, and they finally got rid of it. But it was an issue of where the law was drafted. It wasn't that everybody had why they did it for everybody at the same time. Who knows?
Okay, one or two other quick questions? Okay.
Stand up.
Have been standing up and tell us your name, please.
Sam McCullough. I've been around since Metro started. I'm 65 in May. And I remember all of the talk. As what was said, kids were to be seen and not heard. But I had a really good pair of ears. And I would be in the corner with my toys, when my grandmother, who lived where the Kentucky Fried Chicken is on 8th Avenue now, which is Rosa Parks, was talking to her best friend on North 9th,
Council, she's the first
right
one.
behind, about all
We
of
can't,
this.
let us help you,
My
we can
concern
name it.
is
Oh, you
what
can
Ms.
do
Lynn
that.
said. This new thing, that the state's doing, how are we going to function with that? And our charter is saying differently. Everyone I've talked to feels it's going to even be more. And I don't know what that would mean as far as extending everybody's council seats. I've talked to my representative, and it's just a whole lot of concern for a lot of people. And living in the African American community, it concerns me very much, what could happen.
And I will speak very briefly to that question. What the 40-member council does is give all of us representation in government. The state legislators, the senators and the state reps, they only meet a few months a year, and they don't get the calls when your neighbor's tree has fallen across your driveway and you can't get your car out. They don't get the calls. The council size and you having a councilman, they will answer your call themselves. They won't have a secretary answering your call, and they will be finding the part of Metro government very quickly to solve your problem. And so the size of the council is going to reduce people's access to government.
Probably going to increase your cost to the government too, because if you get down to 20 members, they're all going to need staff. Right now, the staff that's there serves everybody on the council, not each individual council member. I think all of them, when they get down to 20 and the number of people they represent is going to almost double, they're going to want their own staff. Quite frankly, the courthouse is not built to handle that many extra staff people down there. They're going to have to redo the second floor to do that, and it's going to cost a whole lot more money. So they may tell you at the legislature this is more efficient government. No, it's going to be more costly government. And I think it's been pretty clear that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because they're punishing Metro for not wanting to host the Republican National Convention.
I just wonder if you could...
Your name, please?
Jackie Schrago. I wonder if you could give us some idea of the size of the city by some streets we might know today. I remember somebody telling me that 21st and 21st and Blair was a border of the city, which meant almost everything in the city was in the county. Is that right?
Jackie, I grew up in that area,
Yeah.
and I can tell you that the city border, city limits, was in a sign right across the street where Natchez Trace met Woodlawn. That's where the county line, the city line was right
Can you give us
there.
some idea of that elsewhere in the city?
Which means everybody else on the other side going where 440 was, of course it wasn't there then, and all of Green Hills, none of that was in the city, it was all in the county.
I lived on Jefferson Street, and I live on Scoville Street now, which is right behind it. But the area behind all of that, even part of Tennessee State's campus, was in the county.
That's what I thought.
'Cause I remember when they used to pave the street, it would stop. And I wondered why that wasn't paved and this
So
was.
this was in the city, but Tennessee State was in the county.
Well, part of it was.
The agricultural part
The agriculture part of it was.
and where the golf course is
Right.
back there.
Yeah, that was all county.
Douglas Avenue in East Nashville, was where it turned into county. Everything beyond that was county.
Okay.
When my parents bought our house in North Street,
Okay.
my grandmother
Okay.
said,
Okay.
they're almost moving out of the city. They're a block and a half from the county line. So it wasn't very big. I
No.
don't know going east.
Nashville really wasn't that big.
Unfortunately, our time is up. It's come to an end. We want to thank you all for coming out tonight.
I just want to make one comment before we leave. I'm glad to see the young people here.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's very important that you learn this history and understand what we did, and so you'll know what to do in the future. I
So
really-
they can
I really
pass it
believe-
on.
Right. I really believe that.
I want to thank the panelists, panel members for taking part. Carol, Ed, Linda, Pat, thank you all. I want to thank the celebration committee for asking us to take part in this event.
Thank you,
all
Dwight.
very much.
And let's give Dwight a hand and Ms. Brucey and everyone. But again, I'd like to reiterate what Kendall has said, and he's an attorney. And we want the young people to get involved. You all are out tomorrow, and we need you. And like John Lewis said, if you see something that's not right, say something, stand up for something. And we want you, and that's why I want KJ here. I think he's gonna be one of our future leaders, and I'm just so happy about that. So please, we're trying to start a movement when it comes to the young people. I also want to recognize Ms. Fanta. Could you please just stand up? I'm your other mother, just stand up. She is responsible, she's on our committee, she's responsible for the video, and I want you all to know that she was the press secretary in the mayor's office, and she came to us from the library. She's back at the library. It's also important to note that she was like my work daughter, and she found it very fascinating that in 1963, much of what's being talked about here today, I was one of 4 black 12-year-olds. I was born in 51, not much younger than Ed, even though he looks a lot older, but no, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. I have to put a joke in there somewhere. But anyway, Ed and I served on the Metro Council together. We started in 15 and we rolled off in 19. We often had a conversation as to whether we were going to run again. But what I would have you to know is when Carol and others were talking about integrating a year at a time, I fell in line with that year at a time. When I was in the 5th grade, they were integrating up to 5th, then 6th, and so on and so forth. And when I was in the 6th grade, I was at Moses McKissick 1st through 4th. Then I went to Inglewood Elementary. And in 6th grade, my best friend was a little Caucasian girl, and she said, "I'm so sorry." And she called me the N-word and said, "You can't go to Stratford." This was spring of 63. I told her I was going. So I went, and I was the first one there. I got there at 5 o'clock to integrate that school. But Ms. Fanta has seen fit to honor myself and the other young ladies tomorrow night at the Metro Library. Can I invite them to come out? Okay. I would like to invite you all out. It's tomorrow night at the Metro, at the Downtown Public Library at 5:30 tomorrow night. We would love, she's done a display, and we will be on display there for like ever and a day, and I'm grateful for that. But this is very, very important. So I say to young people, position your shoulders so the people coming behind you, yeah, you're young now, but there come a day you'll be as old as we are. And am I right about it? Am I right about it? So I would love for you to say something.
Young people, you said young people, are our future. In my class, I used to say, young people, you need to be involved right now. You can get involved with any issue. Pick any issue that you really have an interest in and get involved.
And that's the only way you can become our future, is get involved right now, and
Right
then
now.
you'll do what we're doing. We're gonna look to you to talk to the younger people. So KJ, we're gonna be looking to you. So we just thank you again. I know I keep calling it, it's just something about that young man. We want you to actually get something to go. We have prepared just a little reception for you all that started before. And at this time, I'd like for the Triumphant Church singers to come and close us out with Lift Every Voice and Sing. Organist Gibson, we're so appreciative. And I'd like for you all to stand here at the front, okay, so everybody can see you really well. And again, when they finish, we would close out with them. And thank you again. Let's give yourselves a round of applause.
We want to say thank you for this opportunity to come and sing at this awesome event. And we have gained something on today that we didn't have before. So appreciate all of you all.
Thank you.
Can we stand for Black and we're going to say that we have put there's a little twist in it, but we hope that you enjoy it.
Good job.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov